Commander Sarah Mitchell gazed through the viewport of the merchant vessel Stellar Horizon, watching distant stars streak by against the endless black of space. After 15 years of deep space cargo runs, she thought she'd seen everything the cosmos had to offer. The steady hum of the ship's engines and the occasional ping of the navigation system had become her constant companions in the vast emptiness between worlds. The Stellar Horizon was making its routine supply run to the outer colonies when the ship's AI chirped to life. "Commander, detecting unusual energy signatures approximately 2.3 light minutes from our current position." Sarah straightened in her chair, fingers dancing across the holographic controls. Analysis. Energy pattern matches no known civilian or military vessels in database. Signature suggests severe damage to propulsion systems. She drummed her fingers on the armrest, weighing her options. The smart move would be to continue on course. Unknown vessels often meant trouble in this sector. But something about the erratic pattern of the energy signature pulled at her conscience. "Plot an intercept course," she ordered, "but maintain safe distance for initial scan." As the Stellar Horizon altered its trajectory, Sarah ran through her pre-boarding checklist. The ship's defensive systems powered up with a low hum, and she made sure her personal sidearm was charged. Years of experience had taught her that kindness and caution weren't mutually exclusive. The unknown vessel slowly came into view, a sleek craft of unfamiliar design, its hull adorned with intricate patterns that seemed to shimmer despite the damage marring its surface. Scorch marks and twisted metal suggested a recent attack, but there were no signs of pursuing vessels. "Life signs?" Sarah questioned, studying the detailed scan results appearing before her. "Two detected. Biological patterns do not match any known species in database. Signs of physical distress indicated." Sarah's jaw tightened. The outer colonies were a melting pot of species, but a completely unknown race this far from the galactic core was unusual. Something had driven them here, and whatever it was, it hadn't been gentle. "Open a communication channel, all frequencies." After a moment of static, a voice came through, melodic but strained with fear and exhaustion. "Please, if anyone can hear us, we seek asylum. Our ship is failing. My daughter." The transmission cut out with a burst of interference. Sarah leaned forward, toggling the comm system. "This is Commander Sarah Mitchell of the merchant vessel Stellar Horizon. I'm reading severe damage to your ship. Do you require assistance?" The response was immediate, desperate. "Yes. Please, we cannot return to our sector. They will find us." "Who's hunting you?" Silence stretched for several seconds before the voice returned, softer now. "Those who would enslave us for our abilities. We are the last of the Lumini. My daughter, she is the future of our species. I beg you." Sarah's fingers hovered over the controls as she processed this information. The Lumini was supposed to be a myth, a species of energy beings capable of unprecedented feats of biological manipulation. If they truly existed, and if this really was one of the last survivors. She made her decision. "I'm initiating emergency docking procedures. Stand by." The Stellar Horizon's docking tube extended, creating a secure passage between the vessels. Sarah grabbed her emergency med kit and made her way to the airlock, her mind racing through contingency plans. The outer colonies had strict laws about harboring refugees, but they also had equally strict laws about preserving endangered species. The political implications alone would be staggering. The airlock cycled, and Sarah stepped through into the damaged ship. The interior architecture was unlike anything she'd ever seen. Organic curves and flowing patterns that seemed to pulse with a faint inner light. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and something sweeter like morning dew. She found them in what appeared to be the ship's control center. The adult Lumini was tall and graceful, with crystalline features that caught and reflected light in mesmerizing ways. But it was the child that took Sarah's breath away, a small figure that seemed to be made of pure starlight, shifting and swirling like a nebula-given form. The adult Lumini rose shakily, supporting herself against a console. "I am Aria," she said, her voice matching the one from the transmission. "This is my daughter, Nova. You risk much by helping us." Sarah moved forward, medical scanner already assessing their conditions. "I'm not in the habit of leaving people to die in space, regardless of who they are or who's after them." She gestured to her ship. "Your vessel's life support is failing. We need to move quickly." As if to emphasize her point, a warning klaxon began to sound throughout the damaged ship. Aria gathered Nova into her arms, the child's form rippling like liquid starlight. "There is something you must know," Aria said urgently. "Those who hunt us, they have allies everywhere. Even if we survive this day, they will not stop searching." Sarah's lips curved into a determined smile. "Then it's fortunate that smuggling cargo past people who'd rather not have it smuggled is something of a specialty of mine." She tapped her comm unit. "Computer, initiate emergency evacuation protocols and set course for the Haven system. Maximum speed once our guests are aboard." As they made their way to the stellar horizon, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just become exponentially more complicated. But watching Aria whisper soothingly to her frightened daughter, she knew she'd made the right choice. Sometimes the most important cargo couldn't be found on any manifest. Back on her ship's bridge, Sarah watched as the damaged Lumini vessel drifted away into the void. She'd set its systems to overload after a delay, leaving no evidence for their pursuers to track. Aria and Nova sat quietly in the auxiliary seats, their crystalline forms casting dancing patterns of light across the cabin walls. "Haven system isn't exactly a popular tourist destination," Sarah explained, plotting their course through the ship's navigation system. "But I know some people there who specialize in helping folks disappear. We'll figure out our next move once we're somewhere safe." Aria's form pulsed with what Sarah was beginning to recognize as emotion. "Why do you risk so much for strangers?" Sarah thought about all the cargo runs she'd made over the years, all the colonies struggling to survive on the edge of known space. "Because out here, everyone's a stranger until someone takes a chance on them. Besides," she added with a slight grin, "helping a mythical species escape extinction makes for a much more interesting day than delivering mining equipment." As the stellar horizon accelerated to faster-than-light speed, Sarah knew that somewhere, pursuit ships would already be changing course to follow. But for now, they were safe, and she had time to plan. The stars streaked by outside, each one a potential haven, each one a possible new beginning. The edge of known space had always been where humanity made its greatest discoveries. Today, Sarah Mitchell had discovered that some myths weren't myths at all, and that sometimes the greatest adventures began with a simple choice to stop and help someone in need. The Haven system lived up to its name only if you had a flexible definition of haven. 3 barely habitable planets orbited a dying red dwarf star, their surfaces scarred by mining operations and dotted with ramshackle settlements. Sarah guided the stellar horizon toward Haven Prime, the largest of the 3 worlds, where rust-colored clouds swirled endlessly over sprawling underground cities. "Home sweet home," Sarah muttered, initiating landing sequences. At least for the next few days, she glanced back at her passengers. Aria had adapted surprisingly well to human accommodations, though Nova remained in a constant state of shimmer, her energy form unable to fully settle in the unfamiliar environment. "They're scanning us," Aria observed, her crystalline features catching the red light from Haven Prime's atmosphere. Sarah nodded. "Standard procedure. Don't worry, I've been running modified transponder codes since we left your ship. As far as anyone knows, we're just another mining support vessel making a supply run." The ship descended through the turbulent atmosphere, the hull creaking under the strain. Sarah had made this approach dozens of times, but never with such precious cargo. As they broke through the cloud layer, the sprawling expanse of Haven Prime's capital came into view. A maze of interconnected dome structures and underground entrances, all built to withstand the planet's harsh environment. "Welcome to New Anchorage," Sarah announced, guiding the ship toward a docking platform on the outskirts of the city. Not the prettiest place in the galaxy, but the locals mind their own business. That's worth more than scenic views out here. As they touched down, Sarah activated the ship's environmental shields, protection against both the caustic atmosphere and prying eyes. She turned to her passengers, her expression serious. Listen carefully. The person we're going to see, he's an old friend, but he's also a businessman. He'll help us, but he'll want something in return. Aria's form pulsed with concern. We have nothing to offer. Sarah smiled. You have knowledge. Information about your species, your technology. That's valuable out here, especially to someone who specializes in keeping secrets. She stood, checking her sidearm out of habit. Just let me do the talking. They disembarked through a sealed corridor, emerging into a bustling docking bay. The air was thick with the smell of machinery and recycled atmosphere. Workers of various species moved about their tasks, barely sparing them a glance. Sarah led them through winding passages, deeper into the city's underground levels. Nova stayed close to her mother, her form occasionally mimicking the metallic surfaces around them, a defensive reflex that Sarah found fascinating. The child's ability to adapt wasn't just biological, it was instinctive, almost artistic in its execution. They arrived at an unmarked door in a quiet section of the city's merchant quarter. Sarah pressed her hand to the scanner, and after a moment, the door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, the office was a stark contrast to the industrial environment outside. Warm lighting, actual wooden furniture, and walls lined with artifacts from across the galaxy. Behind an antique desk sat Marcus Chen, a man whose weathered face and sharp eyes told the story of someone who'd seen too much of the galaxy to be surprised by anything anymore. His cybernetic left arm whirred softly as he stood to greet them. Sarah Mitchell, he said, his voice warm but cautious. Last time you walked through that door, I ended up with a warehouse full of contraband medical supplies and 3 warrants for my arrest. Those warrants were dropped, Sarah replied with a grin, after I paid enough bribes to buy a small moon. Marcus's gaze shifted to Aria and Nova, and for the first time in years, Sarah saw genuine surprise cross his features. Well, this is unexpected. Marcus, meet Aria and Nova. They need to disappear. Marcus walked slowly around his desk, his cybernetic eye scanning the lumini with undisguised fascination. The energy signatures, the molecular instability, impossible. He looked at Sarah. Do you know what they are? I know enough to understand why they need help, Sarah replied firmly. Marcus nodded slowly, returning to his seat. The lumini aren't just myths. They're valuable. Every research institution, every military organization, every corporate entity in the galaxy would pay fortunes just to study them. He leaned forward. And you brought them to me. The question is, why? Because you're the best at making problems disappear, Sarah said, and because you still owe me for Epsilon 9. The mention of Epsilon 9 made Marcus wince. Low blow, Mitchell. He sighed, tapping his cybernetic fingers on the desk. What exactly are you asking for? New identities, transportation to a safe location, and your word that this meeting never happened. Marcus laughed. Is that all? Why not ask for a private planet while you're at it? His expression turned serious. You know what kind of people must be looking for them. This isn't like smuggling medical supplies, Sarah. This could start a war. They're refugees, Sarah insisted, the last of their kind. This isn't about profit or politics. It's about doing what's right. Before Marcus could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the complex. Nova's form flickered in distress as Aria pulled her closer. Marcus's cybernetic eye whirred as he accessed the security feeds. Multiple ships just dropped out of FTL, he reported grimly. Military grade. They're initiating a lockdown of all ports. He looked at Sarah. Your modified transponder codes might have bought you time, but someone tracked you here. Sarah's mind raced through options. How long until they start ground sweeps? An hour, maybe less. Marcus stood, walking to a seemingly solid wall. With a wave of his cybernetic hand, a hidden panel slid open. There's a maintenance tunnel network under the city. It connects to an emergency landing pad in the mining district. He pulled out a data chip, tossing it to Sarah. Landing codes and coordinates for a safe house on Haven 3. It's not much, but it'll buy you time. Sarah caught the chip, surprised by his quick action. Marcus. Don't, he cut her off. Just remember that after this, we're even. Epsilon 9 never happened, and neither did this meeting. He turned to Arya and Nova. Your existence has been theorized for centuries. The fact that you're real, it changes everything. Be careful who you trust. As they hurried through the hidden passage, Sarah could hear the chaos erupting in the city above. Haven Prime's neutral status wouldn't stop their pursuers, not when such a valuable prize was at stake. The hunt was on, and this time, they'd need more than luck to survive. The tunnel stretched ahead into darkness, their path lit only by Nova's gentle glow, and the emergency strips along the floor. Sarah checked her weapons charge and the data chip's coordinates. They had a long way to go, and she had a feeling this was only the beginning of their troubles. But as she watched Nova's light dance along the tunnel walls, creating beautiful patterns that seemed to defy the darkness itself, she knew that some things were worth any risk. The galaxy might be a vast and often dangerous place, but sometimes the most important battles were fought not for profit or power, but for the simple right to exist. The maintenance tunnels beneath New Anchorage were a maze of corroded pipes and forgotten pathways. Sarah led their small group through the darkness, guided by the dim glow of emergency lighting and the pulsing radiance of Nova's energy form. The sound of their footsteps echoed off metal walls, mixing with the distant rumble of the city's industrial heart. How much further? Arya asked, her crystalline voice tight with concern. Nova clung to her, the child's form flickering between states of solid light and ethereal energy. Sarah consulted the data chip's holographic display. Marcus's safe house is in the old mining district. We're about halfway. She stopped abruptly, raising her hand for silence. In the distance, metal scraped against metal. They weren't alone. This way, Sarah whispered, guiding them down a side passage. The tunnel here was narrower, forcing them to move single file. Water dripped from rusted pipes overhead, and the air grew thick with the smell of mineral deposits and decay. A mechanical whirring sound echoed through the tunnels, growing closer. Sarah recognized it immediately. Scout drones. Military grade. Their pursuers were being thorough. Hold still, Arya whispered. Before Sarah could protest, the Lumini's form began to shift and expand, her crystalline structure spreading out like a translucent curtain. Within seconds, Sheila created a shield of pure energy around them, bending light in ways that made Sarah's eyes water. The drone appeared at the intersection ahead, its red scanning beam sweeping the corridor. Sarah held her breath, watching as the light passed through Arya's shield without registering their presence. After what felt like an eternity, the drone moved on, its mechanical whirring fading into the distance. Arya's form collapsed back to normal, her light dimming slightly from the effort. I cannot maintain that level of camouflage for long, she admitted. The energy cost is substantial. Sarah nodded, impressed and concerned. Save your strength. We'll need it later. She checked the map again. There's an old processing plant ahead. We can cut through it to reach the emergency landing pad. They pressed on, moving as quickly as they dared through the darkened tunnels. Nova had grown quiet, her usual shimmer subdued. Sarah wondered what thoughts moved through the mind of a child who carried the future of an entire species. The processing plant loomed before them, a cathedral of abandoned machinery and towering chemical tanks. Catwalks crisscrossed the space overhead, disappearing into shadows. The air here was stale, thick with the ghosts of industrial processes long forgotten. Something's wrong, Arya said suddenly, her form pulsing with alarm. There's an energy signature, familiar. A slow clap echoed through the vast space. On a catwalk above, a figure emerged from the shadows. The woman was tall, her military-grade combat suit adorned with insignias Sarah didn't recognize. But it was her eyes that caught Sarah's attention. They gleamed with an unnatural silver light. "Impressive work, Commander Mitchell," the woman called down. When they told me a simple cargo hauler had managed to spirit away our targets, I hardly believed it. But here you are, proving that humanity's reputation for surprising us is well earned. Sarah's hand tightened on her weapon. "And you are?" "Director Venna Kane, Special Operations Division." The woman's smile didn't reach her silver eyes. "Though I suspect Aria recognizes me by another name." "Betrayer." Aria's voice trembled with emotion. You helped them find our sanctuary, helped them destroy our people." "I helped advance science," Kane corrected. "The Lumini's abilities were wasted on meditation and self-contemplation. Think of what we could achieve with controlled application of your genetic manipulation capabilities. Cures for diseases, enhanced human evolution, the power to reshape life itself." Sarah stepped forward, positioning herself between Kane and her charges. Funny how people always justify atrocities by claiming they're for the greater good. Kane's laugh was cold. A cargo hauler with a conscience. How quaint. Her expression hardened. "Stand aside, Commander. This doesn't have to end badly for you. There's a substantial reward for the Lumini's safe return. You could live very comfortably." "Safe return?" Sarah spat. "You mean imprisonment and experimentation?" "I mean progress." Kane's hand moved to her weapon. "Last chance. The child, especially, is valuable to us. Her powers are still developing, malleable. Think of the breakthroughs we could achieve." Sarah felt Nova press against her leg, trembling. The child's fear was palpable, a physical thing that made the air itself seem to vibrate. And in that moment, Sarah's decision crystallized with perfect clarity. "Here's my counteroffer," she said, her voice steady. "You turn around and leave. Tell your superiors you lost us in the tunnels. Live with the knowledge that some things aren't meant to be controlled or exploited." Kane sighed. Disappointing, but not unexpected. She raised her hand, and shadows moved in the darkness around them. Armed figures emerged from multiple directions, weapons trained on their small group. Humanity's greatest weakness has always been its misplaced sense of morality. What happened next occurred so quickly that Sarah's mind barely had time to process it. Nova, the quiet, frightened child, suddenly blazed with light so intense it turned night to day. The energy burst outward in a wave, and Sarah watched in awe as every piece of metal in the facility began to transform. Weapons twisted and melted. Combat suits warped and fell apart. Even Kane's cybernetic enhancements began to spark and fail. The child's power was rewriting the very molecular structure of everything around them. "Run," Aria shouted, gathering her daughter into her arms. The light show had taken its toll on Nova. Her form flickered weakly, barely maintaining coherence. They ran. Behind them, chaos erupted as Kane's forces tried to regroup with failing equipment and useless weapons. Sarah led them through emergency exits and maintenance shafts, her heart pounding with equal parts exertion and amazement. "That was incredible," she gasped as they finally reached the emergency landing pad. Her ship's remote systems had already begun startup procedures, responding to her encrypted signal. Aria cradled her exhausted daughter. "Now you understand why they hunt us, why they fear us. Nova's abilities, that only a fraction of what our people could do, in the wrong hands." "That's not going to happen," Sarah said firmly, helping them aboard. "Not while I'm breathing." As the stellar horizon lifted off from Haven Prime, Sarah knew they'd struck a serious blow against their pursuers, but Kane's words echoed in her mind. The woman's fanatical dedication suggested this was bigger than just one military operation. There were forces at work here that went beyond simple greed or scientific curiosity. They broke atmosphere just as the first pursuit ships began to rise from the surface. But Sarah had grown up flying these lanes, and she knew every blind spot and sensor shadow in the system. They'd make it to Haven 3, and then, well, one problem at a time. Nova had fallen into an exhausted sleep, her form finally stable. Looking at her, Sarah understood something fundamental about power. It wasn't just about having it, but about choosing how to use it. The child could have destroyed their attackers, but instead, she'd chosen to disable and delay them. Sometimes the greatest strength lay not in what you could do, but in what you chose not to do. The stars beckoned ahead, each one a possible refuge. But first, they needed answers. Kane's appearance had raised too many questions, and Sarah had a feeling that understanding their enemy would be key to surviving what was to come. Haven 3 hung in space like a forgotten jewel, its atmosphere swirling with bands of purple and green from the rare gases that made up its distinctive clouds. Unlike its industrialized siblings, this world remained largely untouched, too volatile for mining, too unstable for colonies. The perfect place to hide. Sarah brought the stellar horizon down through the turbulent atmosphere, fighting against winds that could tear apart lesser ships. The coordinates from Marcus's data chip led them to a narrow valley between towering cliffs of iridescent crystal. Nestled at the base was a structure that seemed to grow from the rock itself, Marcus's safe house. Atmospheric composition is within tolerance for your physical forms, Sarah announced, checking the readings. But we shouldn't stay outside too long. The magnetic storms here can be unpredictable. As they descended the ship's ramp, Nova suddenly perked up, her energy form brightening. The crystalline structures around them seemed to respond, pulsing with faint light that matched her rhythms. Arya gasped softly. These crystals, they're similar to those from our homeworld, she explained, touching one of the formations. They resonate with our energy patterns. Perhaps that's why Marcus chose this location. Inside the safe house, they found a well-stocked facility with living quarters, communications equipment, and what appeared to be a research laboratory. Sarah swept the place for surveillance devices, finding none, before allowing herself to relax slightly. We should be safe here for a while, she said, powering up the facility's defense systems. The magnetic storms interfere with long-range scanners. Anyone looking for us would have to search valley by valley. Arya moved to one of the laboratory terminals, her crystalline fingers dancing across the interface. This equipment, it's not standard research gear. These are quantum resonance scanners, very rare, very expensive. Sarah frowned. Marcus deals in information, not scientific research. Why would he? She stopped as realization dawned. He knew. Somehow he knew about the Lumini before we arrived. Not just knew, came a familiar voice from the doorway. They spun to find Marcus himself stepping out of the shadows, his cybernetic eye glowing softly. I've been studying them for decades. Sarah's weapon was in her hand instantly. Explain, now. Marcus raised his hands slowly. Peace, old friend. I'm not your enemy. In fact, I'm probably the only ally you have left. He moved carefully to a console, bringing up a holographic display. What do you know about Project Starlight? Never heard of it, Sarah replied, weapon still trained on him. 50 years ago, humanity made first contact with the Lumini, Marcus explained. Not official contact, this was before the colonial administration, before standardized first contact protocols. A research vessel stumbled upon their homeworld. The scientists were unprepared for what they found. Images flickered in the air, recordings of crystalline cities that seemed to sing with light, of beings that could reshape matter with a thought. Arya watched with tears in her eyes, while Nova pressed closer to the hologram, reaching out to touch the images of her lost home. The Lumini were peaceful, Marcus continued. They shared their knowledge freely, helping us understand the fundamental nature of energy and matter. But some saw only the potential for weapons, for power. Project Starlight was created to weaponize their abilities. Kane, Sarah growled. She's part of it. Marcus nodded. One of their top operatives. They tried to force the Lumini to reveal their secrets, to transform humans into beings of pure energy. When the Lumini refused, he trailed off, pain evident in his voice. They destroyed our world, Arya finished quietly. Turned our own resonance crystals against us, creating a cascade reaction that shattered our planet's core. Only a few of us escaped. We've been running ever since. Sarah's mind raced. But why help us now, Marcus? What's your stake in this? His cybernetic arm whirred as he rolled up his sleeve, revealing crystalline patterns embedded in the flesh. Because I was there. I was one of the original researchers. I saw what they did, tried to stop it. This, he gestured to his cybernetic parts, was their response to my objections. Nova approached Marcus cautiously, her form shifting through patterns of light. To everyone's surprise, the crystalline elements in his cybernetics responded, glowing faintly in harmony with her energy signature. The resonance patterns, Arya breathed. They're genuine. You've been carrying a piece of our world all this time. Keeping it safe, Marcus corrected, waiting. There were rumors that some had survived, that a child had been born who could unlock the full potential of Lumini abilities. A child who could do more than just manipulate energy, one who could create it. All eyes turned to Nova, who was now creating complex patterns of light between her hands, making the crystals in the walls sing with sympathetic resonance. That's why they want her so badly, Sarah realized. Not just for study, but because she might be able to recreate what was lost, to give them the power they couldn't steal the first time. Marcus nodded grimly, but they don't understand. The Lumini's abilities were never about power, they were about harmony, about understanding the deep connections between all forms of energy and matter. What Nova can do, it's not a weapon, it's a gift. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the facility. Marcus rushed to the security console, his expression darkening. Multiple ships entering the atmosphere. They're following a focused resonance pattern. Someone's tracking the crystalline signatures. Kane, Sarah spat. She must have gotten a reading during Nova's display in the processing plant. We need to move, Marcus said, already powering down systems. There's a secondary facility, deeper in the crystal valleys. If we can reach it. The first explosion rocked the safe house before we could finish. Warning lights flashed as the defense shields strained against a coordinated assault. Through the facility's windows, they could see ships descending through the storms, their hulls gleaming with an unnatural light. They've adapted, Arya said, fear in her voice. Use our own resonance patterns to shield their ships. Sarah checked her weapon, knowing it would be useless against such advanced technology, but she'd come too far to give up now. Marcus, you said the Lumini's power was about harmony. What did you mean? The old information broker smiled, understanding dawning in his natural eye. The crystals in these valleys, they're all connected. One massive network of resonance patterns. If Nova could tap into that network, she could create a disruption large enough to disable their ships, Arya finished. But the power required, it could burn her out completely. Nova stepped forward, her small form blazing with determination. When she spoke, it was for the first time since Sarah had met her, her voice like chimes in the wind. I can do it. For our people. For our future. Sarah looked at the child who carried the hopes of an entire species, then at the ships bearing down on them with weapons powered. Sometimes the greatest battles weren't won with firepower or strategy, but with understanding. The Lumini had always known this. It was humanity that had forgotten. As Nova began to glow with increasing intensity, Sarah made a silent promise. Whatever happened next, she would make sure the truth about the Lumini was known. Not as weapons or tools, but as teachers who had tried to show humanity a better way. The crystal valleys began to sing. The crystal valleys of Haven 3 erupted into a symphony of light and energy as Nova connected with the ancient resonance patterns. Her small form hovered above the ground, no longer solid, but a pure manifestation of radiant energy that pulsed in harmony with the crystalline formations surrounding them. The air itself seemed to vibrate with power, creating waves of color that rippled through the atmosphere. Sarah watched in awe as the child she'd helped protect transformed into something beyond her comprehension. Beside her, Aria's crystalline form pulsed with both pride and fear for her daughter. Marcus stood transfixed, his cybernetic components humming in response to the massive energy surge. Through the facility's viewports, they could see Kane's ships descending through the storms, their modified shields glowing as they attempted to maintain stability against the rising tide of resonance energy. But something was wrong. Nova's light began to flicker, her form struggling to maintain coherence. "She's not strong enough," Aria said, her voice tight with concern. "The network is too vast. She needs harmony," Marcus finished. His cybernetic eye glowed brightly as understanding dawned. The Lumini never worked alone, did they? Their power came from connection, from joining their energies together. Before anyone could respond, he stepped forward, rolling up his sleeve to expose the crystalline implants in his arm. "My resonance patterns, they're not just recordings. They're alive, part of your world's energy. Let me help." Aria hesitated only a moment before moving to join him. "Together then, for all our peoples." She reached out, her crystalline form beginning to pulse in rhythm with Nova's energy signature. Marcus's implants blazed with light as he added his own connection to the resonance network. Sarah felt useless, watching as forces beyond human comprehension swirled around her. But then she noticed something on the security feeds. Ground forces were approaching the facility, taking advantage of the light show above to move in for close-quarter assault. "Keep doing whatever it is you're doing," she called out, checking her weapon. "I'll handle the welcoming committee." The first explosion breached the facility's outer door just as Sarah reached a defensive position. Armed figures in advanced combat suits poured through the opening, their weapons charged with some kind of resonance-based energy. But Sarah hadn't survived 15 years of deep space cargo runs without learning a few tricks. She triggered the facility's emergency protocols, causing maintenance conduits to rupture strategically. Superheated plasma burst from the brakes, creating barriers that forced the attackers to divide their forces. Sarah picked them off methodically, using her knowledge of the facility's layout to stay one step ahead. Above, the battle in the sky had taken on an almost artistic quality. Nova's enhanced power, supported by Aria and Marcus, sent waves of pure energy rolling through the valleys. The crystals sang in response, their resonance patterns amplifying and focusing the power. Kane's ships tried to maintain formation, but their modified shields began to fail against the overwhelming harmony of combined Lumini energy. "Impossible," Kane's voice crackled through the facility's communication system. "Those resonance patterns, they're exceeding all known theoretical limits. Stand down now, or we'll be forced to take more drastic measures." Sarah laughed as she took down another attacker. "Still don't get it, do you? This isn't about power or control. It's about understanding something bigger than ourselves." In the center of the facility, Nova's light had become almost blinding. The resonance network had grown to encompass the entire valley system, creating a web of pure energy that connected everything it touched. Through this connection, Sarah could feel something she hadn't expected: emotions, memories, the shared experiences of all those linked to the network. She saw the Lumini homeworld through Aria's memories, not just its physical beauty, but the profound sense of harmony that had existed there. She felt Marcus's deep regret for humanity's part in its destruction and his decades-long quest for redemption. And through Nova's young but powerful consciousness, she understood what the Lumini had been trying to teach humanity all along. Power wasn't meant to be hoarded or controlled. It was meant to be shared, to create connections that elevated all who participated. The realization hit Kane's forces like a physical blow. Their resonance-based weapons, designed to dominate and destroy, began to backfire as the harmony of the network overwhelmed their crude attempts at control. Ships lost power, combat suits failed, and the very crystals they had tried to weaponize turned against them. But Nova wasn't attacking them, she was offering connection. Through the resonance network, every person in the valley could feel the truth of the Lumini's purpose. They had never meant to be weapons or tools of power. They were teachers, showing humanity a path to understanding the fundamental connections that bound all living things together. Kane's flagship, hovering above the valley, suddenly lost all power. As it began to fall, Nova's energy field expanded to catch it, lowering the massive vessel safely to the ground. Even in victory, the Lumini chose harmony over destruction. The resonance network gradually stabilized, its power no longer overwhelming but present in a way that changed the very feel of the valley. Nova returned to her more solid form, exhausted but triumphant. Aria caught her daughter as she descended, holding her close as tears of pure light ran down her crystalline face. Marcus's cybernetic components had been transformed, the crystalline elements now fully integrated with his human biology. He stared his arm in wonder as patterns of light danced beneath his skin. All these years, he whispered, we were asking the wrong questions. It was never about what the Lumini could do for us, but what they could show us about ourselves. Sarah moved to secure Kane and her surviving forces, who stood in shocked silence, their weapons forgotten as they processed what they had experienced through the resonance network. The truth about Project Starlight would come out now, not as a scandal to be buried, but as a lesson about the price of putting power before understanding. What happens now? Sarah asked, looking at the transformed valley around them. The crystals continued to pulse with a soft light, forever changed by their connection to Nova's power. Aria smiled, still holding her daughter close. Now we teach, as we always meant to. There are others like Marcus, humans who understand that true power lies in harmony, not control. Haven 3 can become what my homeworld once was, a place of learning and connection. Nova stirred in her mother's arms, her light dimmed but steady. Can Sarah stay? She asked softly, speaking again for only the second time. She understands too. Sarah felt something warm bloom in her chest, a sense of belonging she hadn't experienced since her early days of spaceflight. Looking at the small family she'd risked everything to protect, at Marcus, with his newly awakened connection to the Lumini energy, at the transformed valley that promised a new beginning, she knew her cargo-hauling days were over. Some cargo, after all, wasn't meant to be delivered, but to deliver us to where we needed to be all along. The crystals sang softly in agreement, their harmonies promising not an ending, but a new beginning. One where humanity and Lumini could learn from each other, growing together in understanding and purpose. The Symphony of Light had only just begun. 6 months after the battle in the Crystal Valleys, Haven 3 had transformed beyond recognition. The once volatile world had stabilized, its magnetic storms tamed by the harmonious resonance of Lumini energy that now permeated the planet's crystalline structures. Where there had been only Marcus's hidden facility, a new settlement had grown, not imposed upon the landscape, but emerging from it in graceful spires of living crystal and light. Sarah stood at the observation deck of what they now called the Harmony Center, watching as another group of carefully vetted students arrived in the valley below. The selection process was rigorous. They accepted only those who sought understanding rather than power, wisdom rather than advantage. Still keeping watch? Aria's melodic voice came from behind her. The Lumini had grown stronger in the months since their escape, her crystalline form now radiating a constant, steady light that spoke of inner peace. Sarah smiled, turning to face her friend. Old habits. Hard to believe sometimes that we're not still running. They had transformed Kane's defeat into an opportunity. When the truth about Project Starlight became public, thanks to Marcus's careful documentation and the testimony of those who had experienced the resonance network firsthand, the reaction had been unexpected. Instead of fear or demands for weapon research, the dominant response had been curiosity and wonder. The first volunteers had been scientists and researchers, drawn by the possibility of understanding the fundamental forces that the Lumini could perceive and manipulate. But others followed, artists inspired by the harmonious energies, philosophers seeking deeper truths, and ordinary people who felt called to something greater than themselves. Nova had flourished in this environment, No longer hiding her abilities, she had become a bridge between species, helping humans understand the subtle energies that connected all living things. Sarah watched as the child, though she was quickly growing beyond such a simple description, led a group of students through their first resonance exercises in the courtyard below. "She's teaching them the star dance," Arya observed proudly. The students' movements followed Nova's guidance, their bodies tracing patterns that mimicked the flow of cosmic energy. Small crystals embedded in their training suits glowed in response, helping them visualize the connections they were learning to feel. Marcus appeared from one of the crystalline corridors, his transformed cybernetics now a seamless blend of human technology and Lumini energy. "The latest results from the medical research team are promising," he reported. "The resonance therapies are showing significant success in treating conditions we once thought incurable." This had been one of the most profound developments, the discovery that Lumini energy, properly harmonized, could help heal not just bodies but minds. The same forces that Kane had wanted to weaponize were now being used to repair neural damage, regenerate tissues, and restore balance to disturbed systems. "And what about our other project?" Sarah asked, following Marcus to a secure laboratory deep within the facility. Here, surrounded by humming crystals and sophisticated monitoring equipment, they were attempting something unprecedented, teaching humans to achieve a limited form of Lumini energy manipulation. "See for yourself," Marcus said, gesturing to where a young researcher sat in meditation. As they watched, her body began to emit a faint glow, nothing like the radiance of true Lumini, but a definite manifestation of resonance energy. "It's not about changing what we are, but understanding what we could become through harmony rather than force." Sarah remembered Kane's words about enhanced human evolution. The irony wasn't lost on her. Humanity was evolving, not through conquest or control, but through understanding and cooperation. The very thing Project Starlight had tried to steal was being freely given to those who approached with open hearts and minds. A soft alarm chimed through the facility. "Incoming transmission from the Galactic Council," the facility's AI announced. Since the revelation of the Lumini's survival and the truth about Project Starlight, various political entities had been scrambling to establish relations with Haven 3. Some sought knowledge, others redemption for past wrongs. "Put it through to my office," Marcus said. "The Council's support has been crucial in maintaining our independence. The political battles have been as challenging as the physical ones, but the evidence of positive change happening at the Harmony Center was hard to argue against." Later that evening, Sarah found herself back on the observation deck, watching the triple moons of Haven 3 rise over the crystal valleys. Nova joined her, the young Lumini's form shifting through subtle patterns of light that reflected her thoughts. "Do you ever miss it?" Nova asked. "The freedom of space, the open stars." Sarah considered the question. Her ship, the Stellar Horizon, sat in a hangar below, maintained but rarely used now. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but I found something better than freedom here. Purpose." Nova's light brightened in response. "Mother says you're ready to try the deep resonance. Your energy patterns have stabilized enough." The deep resonance was the most profound level of Lumini teaching, a direct connection to the fundamental harmonies of the universe. Few humans had attempted it, and even fewer had succeeded. The process could be overwhelming, even dangerous for minds not prepared to comprehend such vast connections. "You think I'm ready?" Sarah asked, feeling a mix of excitement and apprehension. Nova's form shifted into a pattern Sarah had learned to recognize as amusement. "You were ready the moment you chose to help us without asking for anything in return. Understanding isn't about ability, it's about openness to possibility." As if in response to Nova's words, the crystals throughout the valley began to sing their evening song, a harmonic convergence that happened naturally now, a reminder of the new reality they were building. Students and teachers paused in their activities to listen, some joining in with their own resonance patterns, creating a symphony of light and energy that reached toward the stars. Sarah felt the familiar warmth in her chest. That sense of belonging that had first bloomed during the battle 6 months ago. She had started this journey as a simple cargo hauler, trying to do the right thing. Now she was part of something greater, something that could change the course of human development. "Your mother told me once that the Lumini were teachers," Sarah said, watching the lights dance across the valley. I didn't understand then what she meant. It wasn't just about teaching techniques or abilities. It was about showing us a different way to exist, not alone, but in harmony. Nova's light pulsed in agreement, and now you help teach others. The circle continues, grows stronger. This is how change happens, not in great leaps, but in small moments of understanding, passed from one heart to another. The stars above seemed brighter somehow, as if responding to the resonance energy flowing from the valley. Somewhere out there, humanity was continuing its expansion into the cosmos. But here on Haven 3, a new path was being forged, one that promised not conquest, but connection, not power, but understanding. The cargo hauler who had once measured her life in credits and contracts now measured it in moments of illumination, in the growing symphony of harmonious energy that connected all living things. Sarah Mitchell had found her true destination, not in any physical place, but in the space between stars where light and understanding danced together. As the evening song reached its crescendo, Sarah felt the first stirrings of deep resonance within her own consciousness. The universe, it seemed, had been waiting all along for humanity to stop trying to take and simply learn to listen. And in the crystal valleys of Haven 3, that lesson was finally being heard. 10 years after the discovery of the Lumini on Haven 3, the galaxy had changed in ways few could have predicted. The Harmony Center had grown into a beacon of hope and learning, its influence spreading far beyond the crystal valleys where it all began. Sarah Mitchell stood in what they now call the Chamber of Echoes, watching as Nova, no longer a child, but a radiant being of immense wisdom, prepared for the most ambitious undertaking in the center's history. "The resonance network is stable," Marcus reported, his cybernetic systems now fully integrated with the chamber's crystalline architecture. Age had weathered his face, but the light that flowed through his transformed body kept him vital and strong. All monitoring stations report optimal harmony levels. Today would mark the first attempt at what the Lumini had once considered routine, the creation of a permanent gateway between distant points in space, maintained by pure resonance energy. If successful, it would revolutionize interstellar travel and communication, bringing together worlds that had once been separated by vast distances. Area, her crystalline form now a complex matrix of light and energy, moved through final preparations with graceful precision. "The patterns are aligning," she announced, her voice carrying harmonics that made the chamber's crystals sing. "All participants are in position." The chamber itself was a marvel of combined human and Lumini engineering. Crystalline spires rose from floor to ceiling, the faceted surfaces reflecting and amplifying the energy that flowed through the space. Around the central platform, dozens of trained resonance sensitives, humans who had learned to channel and direct Lumini energy, sat in meditative poses, their bodies glowing with soft light. Sarah touched the crystalline pendant at her throat, a graduation gift from her completion of deep resonance training 5 years ago. The journey hadn't been easy. Human minds weren't naturally equipped to handle such profound connections to universal energy. But they had learned, adapted, grown, just as the Lumini had hoped they would. "Remember when you first found us?" Nova asked, her form shifting through patterns that reflected starlight and nebulae. A frightened child and a desperate mother, running from those who would exploit us. Sarah smiled at the memory. "Seems like several lifetimes ago. I was just a cargo hauler trying to do the right thing." "You were more than that," Nova replied. "You were the first to truly understand what we offered, not power to be taken, but wisdom to be shared." The resonance sensitives began their preliminary harmonizations, filling the chamber with waves of pure energy that rippled through the crystalline structures. Each human had spent years learning to attune themselves to these frequencies, to become living conductors of the universe's fundamental forces. Marcus's monitoring systems to display the growing power levels in dancing patterns of light. Primary resonance reaching optimal levels. Secondary harmonics stabilizing. We're approaching the threshold. This was the crucial moment. Previous attempts at gateway creation had failed when the energy patterns became too unstable for human participants to maintain. But they had learned from each failure, refined their techniques, strengthened the bonds between human consciousness and Lumini energy. Nova took her position at the center of the chamber, her form beginning to pulse with increasing intensity. The light that emanated from her was different now than it had been during that desperate battle a decade ago. Not just powerful, but precisely controlled, perfectly harmonized. Beginning primary sequence, she announced. The chamber's crystals responded to her energy, that a song rising in pitch and complexity. The human participants added their own resonance patterns, creating layers of harmony that built upon each other like an intricate symphony. Sarah felt the deep resonance stirring within her, responding to the growing energy. Through her training, she had learned to perceive the subtle connections that bound all things together, the web of energy that the Lumini had always known existed. Now she could feel those connections strengthening, focusing, taking on new forms under Nova's guidance. A point of light appeared in the center of the chamber, tiny at first but growing steadily. Unlike the harsh, artificial portals created by conventional jump drives, this gateway emerged organically, its edges rippling like waves on a cosmic shore. Quantum coherence achieving stability, Marcus reported, his cybernetic eye whirring as it processed the massive influx of data. Pattern recognition confirms, by the stars, it's working. Through the growing portal, they could see another chamber, a mirror of their own, constructed on a world 50 light-years distant. Other resonance sensitives were visible there, maintaining their end of the harmonic bridge. Distance meant nothing to the fundamental forces they had learned to channel. But something else was happening, something unexpected yet wonderful. The gateway wasn't just connecting 2 points in space, it was creating a permanent resonance link between them. The very fabric of space-time was being gently rewoven, not torn or forced, but persuaded to create a lasting harmony. This is what my people tried to teach humanity from the beginning, Arya said softly, watching as the gateway stabilized. That the universe isn't something to be conquered or controlled. It's a song waiting to be joined, a harmony seeking new voices. The success of the Gateway project would change everything, but unlike the military applications that Project Starlight had sought, these changes would come through cooperation and understanding. The network of resonance sensitives would grow, connecting worlds not through force or politics, but through shared harmony. Sarah thought about her old ship, the Stellar Horizon, now preserved in the center's museum as a reminder of how their journey began. Space travel wouldn't become obsolete. There would always be those who preferred the long path between stars. But humanity had been given a new way forward, a path that led not to domination, but to deeper understanding. We should contact the Council, Marcus suggested as the Gateway achieved full stability. They'll want to begin implementing the expansion protocols we discussed. But Sarah raised her hand, asking for patience. Let's just appreciate this moment, she said. 10 years ago, we were running for our lives. Now we're building bridges between stars. Nova's light rippled with agreement. The true legacy of the Lumini was never about the abilities we possessed. It was about showing others that there are always alternatives to force, always paths to harmony if we're willing to look for them. The Gateway pulsed with steady light, a testament to what could be achieved when different species chose to learn from each other rather than exploit or fear their differences. The crystal valleys of Haven 3 had become more than just a sanctuary. They were a promise of what the future could be. As the evening approached, Sarah stood once again at her favorite observation point, watching the 3 moons rise over the transformed landscape. The Gateway project was just the beginning. Already, new students were arriving, drawn by the success of human Lumini cooperation. Each would carry these teachings back to their own worlds, spreading the understanding that true power lay not in domination, but in harmony. The cargo hauler who had once measured success in credits now measured it in moments of connection, in the growing web of understanding that spread from world to world. The universe, she had learned, was far more wonderful than humanity had imagined, not a frontier to be conquered, but a symphony waiting for new voices to join its eternal song. In the valleys below, the evening song began, human voices and Lumini energy weaving together in patterns that reached toward the stars. Sarah joined in, adding her own resonance to the harmony. The future was bright with possibility, illuminated by the legacy of light that had begun with a simple choice to help those in need. The stars seemed to pulse in response, as if the entire galaxy was slowly awakening to a new way of being. The journey that had begun with a desperate escape had become something far greater, a testament to the power of understanding, the strength of harmony, and the endless possibilities that arose when different peoples chose to learn from each other rather than fear their differences. The symphony of light played on, and the universe listened.